Production funding for Behind the Headlines is made possible in part by the WKNO Production Fund, the WKNO Endowment Fund, and by viewers like you. Thank you.
How City Council is reacting to coronavirus, protests, budgets, and more tonight on Behind the Headlines. I'm Eric Barnes with the Daily Memphian. Thanks for joining us as we continue to do the show remotely. I am joined today by JB Smiley from the Memphis City Council. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Looking forward to it.
Along with Bill Dries from the Daily Memphian. So Councilman Smiley, there's so much going on so many levels, but I wanted to start there's so many important things, but I want to start with coronavirus and your sense of where we are in terms of not so much reopening, but maybe taking some steps backwards. And again, this is a thing that is changing probably every day. We're recording this Thursday morning. What's your sense of do we need to pause the reopening, or do we even really need to take some major steps back?
Well, right now, the council and Mayor Strickland, we listen to the experts, and Dr. Jan, who is the city's infectious disease consultant, is basically, just taking a look at everything in the totality. And ultimately, from his standpoint, what really matters when we talk about the coronavirus is the transmission rate. And as long as we're below 1 or right at 1, we're okay. But whenever we start to far exceed 1, we're in trouble. So we have our next call this Thursday. And if that number is like 1.5 or significantly over 1, I think at that point we will probably start taking steps back. But the last I've heard, we were at like 1.02, which is meaning the virus is kind of stagnant in terms of the transmission rate. So I do think we need to approach the situation slow and be cautious, because we don't know where we're going to be in the next week or two. We don't want to find ourselves in a situation of opening everything back up and we have to shut everything back down. So I think we need to be cautious and rely on the experts. I'm a lawyer by trade and not a scientist. So
not an infectious
I rely on the experts.
Yeah. Well, but you do. What do you hear from your constituents, and maybe some do you individuals want to reopen or close down, and what do business owners that are your constituents? What do they say?
Well, it's a wide variety. If I scroll through my email, this morning, or if I just think about the few emails that I received yesterday, you have a wide variety of responses, and it usually depends on what part of the city you're in and what you do for a living. Most of the emails from business owners, they're concerned about going back to phase 1. They're concerned about, the mask ordinance. They feel like they're going to lose business, especially during these times when the amount of people who frequent their establishments have decreased. But if you go to 38116 in Whitehaven, those seasoned folk in Whitehaven, they're going to say, we need to slow down, to shut everything down. Everybody needs to go back in, and everybody needs to be wearing a mask. So it depends on where you are. But for the majority of my district, which is Super District 8, what's half of Memphis, they're going to tell you that we need to slow down, we need to wear masks. But the business owners seem to disagree, because ultimately for them, it's the bottom line.
Yeah. You talked about, one more question, and I'll go to Bill. You talked about Whitehaven, obviously, a predominantly African-American Black community. Talk about the sensitivity to coronavirus as more and more it is obvious, both statistically and anecdotally. This is hitting much, much harder among African Americans, among Hispanics. And so is that, do you think, reflected in the comment you just made, that people living in predominantly Black neighborhoods are seeing more people, their neighbors, friends, family, getting sick?
Absolutely. And I think you're absolutely right. When we talk about who's being affected the most, all the studies, all the numbers tell you it disproportionately affects Black Americans. So that's why you have the emails. When you have emails from different people, if I can see the zip code, the very first thing I see, I can tell you 9 times out of 10, they're whether they're going to be apprehensive about opening up or whether they're going to be all for it. It usually comes right down to the zip code, where they live, where they grew up. And if you're in a predominantly Black community, if you're a Black person, 9 times out of 10, you'll be able to point to someone that you encountered or touched directly that has been a victim or have contracted the coronavirus.
Yeah. Let me go to Bill.
Councilman, you were among the majority on the council who voted for the mask ordinance that was sponsored by your colleague, Dr. Jeff Warren. How much are you hearing about the mask ordinance?
Woo. I guess I really don't know where to begin with the mask ordinance. So I will tell you this: upon the first reading of the mask ordinance, soon before even the first reading, when we started floating, or Dr. Warren started floating the idea of implementing the mask ordinance, thousands of emails, and for the most part, it was from the business owners concerned about, bottom line, the viability during these times and whether it would be prudent to what they would call shut down the economy. And for me, I'm trying to balance, the will of the business community, but also making sure that we place a high degree of importance on the lives of the people in the city of Memphis. But emails from prior to the actual reading of the ordinance until the actual implementation, the emails still come. Some of the, I voted in favor of the ordinance because ultimately for me, I think we should value people over profit. And I'm not a scientist, and the experts tell me this would, slow the spread. I'm going to listen to the experts. Now, if I was a doctor, scientist, I would, have my own opinion where I can go through some type of scientific process and say, okay, this is the answer. But when we take in consideration what the doctors tells us, what the numbers show, it seems to be the most effective thing going forward. But emails, phone calls, lately we have received, I can't speak for everyone else, I've received emails from people in the community thanking us for, taking proactive action. And since we've implemented the mask ordinance, Little Rock's implemented a mask ordinance. Other cities haven't implemented a mask ordinance. So I know we may have been one of the first municipalities to do it, but if you can just take a look around the country, other municipalities are following in place.
Mm-hmm. There is so much going on several fronts before the council right now, and one of those is police reform. And you've been fairly aggressive on this, and I take it it's because you feel like this is the time to deal with this issue, correct?
Correct. I've said a number of times the urgency of now. The reason that I use that phrase often is because when we just look at the climate that we have, the number of citizens, the number of students, the number of young people who are truly engaged in the political process is probably at the all-time high in my lifetime. And when you talk about creating change or implementing policy that can affect change, there's no better time to do it because there's no way that issues can be swept under the rug, no way that issues can escape because everyone's paying attention. I ask all of those who are paying attention, when we get past this moment in time, don't allow this to be the only time that you are engaged. Because for me as a legislator, when I know for sure what the people want, when people are very vocal about it, it makes my decision or makes my train of thinking more in line with the people, and I know what type of policies that the people would like to see. But I like the time we're in now, especially the level of engagement.
The council has approved 3 resolutions at this point, including the 8 can't wait philosophies calling for a citizens committee to be involved in the selection of a new police director when Director Rawlings retires next year. And you were involved in those. All of those were wishes that the council had, that they weren't necessarily binding on the mayor to do anything. Is that enough, or is there more to come in the way of proposals?
Well, what I can tell you is this. I don't think this is the council vote. I think this council is more in tune with what the community wants. And just today, heading to sit down for this interview, there was an article that came out by a very prominent pastor, Dr. J. Lawrence Turner of Mississippi Boulevard. And he speaks very sternly, very forcefully, but respectfully about what the community wants. His congregation is one of the largest in the city, and he's calling for substantive changes, not dressing up his words, not dressing up the status quo and disguising it as police reform. So we have to think proactively. We have to think innovatively if we're talking about truly making substantive changes to the way that we police our communities. And for the council, I can almost guarantee at the next council meeting, there will be multiple ordinances, multiple resolutions, and maybe a potential ordinance within the next 2 meetings that will deal with police reform. It's all about making sure that when we implement something, where we advocate for something, that it is legally binding, it's well within the council's authority. And if it's not, we try to make sure that it reaches the 7th floor in Mayor Strickland's office, the city's administration office, so that he understands that we have to do more than just, put a Band-Aid on a problem that's been prevalent in our community for years.
The pastor was among the religious leaders who met privately with the mayor over about a 1-month period, and 9 leaders in that group were very critical of the mayor after those meetings, saying that so far what he's proposed is not enough. What's your view of the changes that the mayor has outlined so far?
Well, I wouldn't be as critical as some of the others, but what I will say is we can do better. And I wouldn't fault entirely the mayor's administration. I would fault the council. I think we have enough authority to make change, even if the mayor falls short or misses something. I think it's incumbent upon us as elected officials as well to do our job, to do more. And my pledge is to keep learning, keep studying, and making sure that the policies that come forth from our body reflect the will of the people. But I do think, as elected officials, generally, and specifically to the council and the mayor's administration, we all can do better. I think we have to.
Before we go back to Eric, I know that we have first reading of the ordinance at the first meeting in July, first reading of the ordinance to rescind the referendum on police and firefighter residency. What else is waiting in the wings? Can you give me a preview here?
Put me on the spot. I can't really give you a preview, but what I can tell you is, one, I'm gonna go back to the referendum related to police residency. We have received numerous of calls from preachers in the community, their congregation, asking for that to be removed off the ballot. For me, Super District 8 does not want it on the ballot, and that's who I represent. So when I communicate or when I speak to that issue, it's the will of the community. And I think a lot of my colleagues have felt that pressure from the community, whether it's emails, whether it's mass text messages. They have several different ways to reach us at this point. I feel like that's going to be a big issue. And all of the council members will echo, they've heard from someone in the community asking for that to be taken off the ballot, especially when you're in a predominantly Black neighborhood or represent a predominantly Black district. But as for any other resolutions or ordinances, just stay tuned. We're working.
Let me, in the clarification, maybe this is actually a question for Bill or for you, Councilman. The referendum that's on in the fall, for people who aren't as close to this, that was to expand residency beyond the borders of Shelby County to, was it a 50 mile or 100?
So it's expanded to a 50-mile radius. And right now, the proposed ordinance, it will remove that from the ballot. And that comes for the second reading at the next council meeting, and then the third reading, the meeting following after. And at that point, the council will make a final vote on whether to allow it to remain on the ballot or to remove it from the ballot.
Right. And your opposition to that is why? I mean, the people who, there's a lot going on in this conversation, but, people who want to get the number of police back to its old level say you can't do that unless you expand the geographic region, the pool of people you can hire. You see that as problematic. Why?
So I don't necessarily see it as problematic. So my job is to reflect the will of the people that I represent. And the will of the people that I represent want to see that off the ballot. But the arguments for it, and I think that's where when I try to look at issues, I see here's an argument for this position. I understand it. Can reasonable minds differ? Yes. So that's where I come. Reasonable minds can differ on this issue. But some of the arguments to remove it from the ballot, one, there's been studies to show that a declining police force, in terms of it's a nationwide issue, a community issue as well. But the number of police that decline doesn't necessarily reflect that the crime rate is going to increase. Actually, over the time that we've had a sharp decrease in police force, I think there was during AC's administration, violent crime crime totality has decreased. So that doesn't necessarily, we have more police. That means we're going to have a reduced number of crime. Some of the other arguments against it would be police are supposed to be for the community, of the community. It's hard to be of the community or for community when you're not living in that community. I've heard someone say that we're hiring vigilantes to come in, do what they have to do, then leave. And another argument is the slippery slope argument. Once we start expanding the boundaries for police and fire, are we going to expand the boundaries for all city employees? Are we going to expand the boundaries? And then we're talking about a shrinking tax base. So we're already losing several people based on people relocating, de-annexation. So I think there's several arguments why we should take it off, and there's also arguments for it. I asked Director Rollins about it, and he said, his mind, this would be the best way to get us to a full complement, and a full complement will reduce crime. I'm not really sold on either argument 100%, but I can see where reasonable minds can differ. And I think this is a situation where reasonable minds can differ.
Well, in this whole conversation about, police reform nationally or changes to police, there's this notion of defund the police departments. Memphis under Mayor Strickland has been very much in a different direction of, as we've talked about, trying to add police and trying to get back to, as the mayor would say, the number of something like 2,300. We're right around, I think, 2,000 right now, police officers.
Yeah, we're slightly over 2,000 at this point.
Yeah. What's your take? I mean, is it about, or is this a time, because Memphis has a crime problem. Every city in the country has a crime problem. Memphis has one that can be very bad. It is probably particularly, it is particularly hard. It is Black people and Black neighborhoods that are hit the most by the crime problem. So if increasing the number of police isn't the answer, what is the answer relative to police reforms, right? How do you reform the police but still reduce crime?
Well, I think, so I've had a conversation with a professor whose sole area of study is to view the Black community and its relationship with the police. And he would argue that we're not necessarily talking about, reforming the police. It's more so about reinvesting in areas that can stop poverty before they start. So a lot of the emails that we receive follows this line of thinking, whether it's investing in early childhood education. And studies show that the more opportunities you have as it relates to education, the less likely you commit crime. The more money you're able to accumulate in your profession, the less likely you are to commit crime. Memphis has a crime problem, but Memphis also has a distribution of resources problem as well. And I would argue that crime is just a symptom of poverty, lack of opportunity, lack of equity in our city and in our nation. I think if we truly want to reduce crime, I think we have to start before the crime starts. It's not it's not solely we're responding retroactively as opposed to
Yeah.
proactively.
And one more question, I'll go to Bill, and I don't mean this flippantly, and almost
Okay.
presume this may seem flippant. So I apologize if it does, because I don't mean it that way.
It's all good.
The tension or the challenge of that notion of investment, and from Mayor Harris was on the show last week talking about investing more money in the way you described. Mayor Strickland has been on the show and has made many statements that he always points to investments in pre-K and investments in non-police entities to improve people's lives for the long term, so they don't end up in crime. But the flip side is that if there is a robbery underway, there are some people who are right now committing crimes, and
Absolutely.
you've got to have, or don't you have to have police to respond to them quickly and authoritatively? And so, like, right, I mean, how do you balance these long-term investments that I think most everyone can get on board with, maybe not everyone, but most people, with the immediate need of crime that might happen today, tomorrow, or this weekend?
Yeah, so for me, I think it's a very real conversation that you have to have. And when I think through the issue, always come back to right now. I think it would be haphazard, ill-advised for us to say, you know what, let's disband the police, because at some point we're still going to need some type of entity, whether we call it police or community engagement officers, whatever we want to call it. We're still going to need someone or some entity go out to and respond. So I think we understand the need for that, and I think at our complement now, we are absolutely fine. When we have protests, we have ample number of officers. When there was concerns about destroying some of the Confederate statues, we had ample number of officers out there. I don't think it's a conversation about truly increasing the complement. I think this is a conversation about the roles that police play. Some police often go out to calls, and it's essentially a situation where someone needs to talk to them. They need a counselor, they need a social worker, they need someone to help them think through some of the problems. So I think it's a conversation about what is our police force, or whatever entity, whatever name we want to call it, what are we doing? Should we be hiring social workers? Should we be hiring counselors to respond to some of those less serious calls that we receive? And I would argue yes.
Yeah. With 4 minutes here, 3 minutes, go to Bill.
We're just through budget season, a relatively calm budget season at City Hall compared to what happened before the Shelby County Commission. But that brings to mind a question about police funding. The police department accounts for, I think, 39%
About 40%
of the city budget. Is that too much in your view?
Well, this was my first budget. So for me, I wanted to make sure that when I approached this budget, I came in with using my 2 ears as opposed to my one mouth, making sure I understood the process, making sure I understood why the arguments for the money being allocated the way it was. And I've been on the record several times and saying, after this budget process, and I see, because I asked a very clear statement to Director Rollins, will the budget that you receive this year reduce crime? Because ultimately, that's what we want. We want a city where we can feel safe. We want a city where crime is reduced. And Director Rollins gave me a very direct answer. His answer was yes. Now, if we're a year from now, if we're having this very same conversation and crime is increased and across the board, then I think we have to take a strong look at doing other things with money. But it's not just the police force. I think we have that very same conversation a year from now as it relates to every department. With the budget you receive, because everyone said that the budget will put them in a better position than they were the year before. And if we take a look at every budget, every department, if the budget was not effectively used, did not serve its purpose, then we have to reevaluate it and distribute it in places that can truly use it and truly benefit the people in the city of Memphis.
So the discussion is not, in your mind, about the police just have too much money, let's take some of it away. This is about reallocating it if that is the case. And it's possibly about taking some things off of the police department's plate, including possibly mental health calls and changing that.
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. So we're asking our police force to respond to calls that people with 12, 13, 14, 15 years of post-secondary education have to respond to. It takes professional training. It takes advanced learning. It takes apprenticeship. It takes a different type of individual to respond to some of these calls. So we're asking our police force with about 6 months of training dealing with certain things to go out and respond to individuals with mental health crisis. We ask them to respond to individuals who need counselor, need a psychologist, need a psychiatrist. We asking our police force to do absolutely too much. We have to take some of those responsibilities off of them. So I don't think it's a situation where we necessarily need to increase the complement. I think it's a situation where we bring other entities in the fold so that they can respond to those type of issues.
Right.
Just
Eric?
a couple seconds left here. I mean, are you worried? We're in a recession. This is obviously a huge economic hit that the pandemic has triggered. Argument that it could get worse before it gets better, as bad as it's been. Are you worried about the future of the budget in 20 seconds or less?
No, I'm absolutely not worried about the future of the budget. As we've seen, the federal government has come in and infused, I think it was $133 million into the city budget, gave about $100 million to the county's budget. So I'm not necessarily concerned about the budget. When I think about, the budget in totality, the only thing that I'm concerned with is whether or not we are distributing the resources in the right way.
All right, I didn't give you enough time on that, but I appreciate your answer. Thank you for joining us, Councilman Smiley. And that is all the time we have this week. Remember, you can get past episodes of the show at WKNO.org or download the podcast from the Daily Memphian site or wherever you get your podcasts. See you next week.